Is Dana White living under a rock? Because despite him being the president of the UFC for over 30 years, it still hasn't occurred to him that actually people can have success moving up weight classes, even after seeing what Terrence Crawford did moving up multiple weight classes to beat Canelo, Ilia Topuria flatlining Charles Oliveira in less than a couple of minutes. Like, Dana White still is under the impression that, well, it's just too big for him. And that's what he thinks about Alex Pereira moving up to heavyweight, because he's been saying it makes no sense. And in part, it's because Pereira's a small fry. He didn't say those words exactly. We're going to react to exactly what he said. But in this video, I am going to completely demolish this idea that Pereira is just too small for heavyweight and that Tom Aspinall would just destroy him. Okay? I'm not saying that Tom Aspinall can't destroy Alex Pereira. I'm just saying there are still a good amount of fans that think that Tom Aspinall, because he's a heavyweight and he knocks people out, it's just a joke to consider Alex Pereira moving up to heavyweight. Okay, and I'm also going to talk about why the Jones and Pereira fight makes no sense compared to the Aspinall and Pereira fight, and why the UFC needs to make this fight, and why we shouldn't just do the usual, oh, let's just do the next contender in line. This is a once-in-a-decade kind of fight. The UFC needs to jump on this opportunity, and it needs to be next, after Aspinall versus Gane. But first and foremost, let's react to what Dana White had to say at his post-fight press conference. His post-fight press conference. Dana White wasn't fighting, but at the UFC 320 post-fight press conference.
What is your hesitation about him going up to heavyweight? He's mentioned it a few times in the past. He always wanted that Jon Jones fight, and I understand why maybe that fight wasn't appealing to you, but what is your reservations about sending him to heavyweight at this point?
Probably that he was a middleweight. He was a middleweight.
Probably because he was a middleweight. Get a load of this guy asking such a dumb question. Hey, man, Pereira fought at middleweight. That's 185 pounds, the metric of blub. Yep, the thing that accumulates mass, the bone, the tendon, the muscle, the fat. Pereira only was 185 blubs, and Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall and those big boys at heavyweight have more blub. So it's just a joke. Even though Alex Pereira is talked about as being built of mahogany by Joe Rogan, and people are constantly talking about how, oh my goodness, Pereira's just, how is he even making weight? Even though Pereira was quite literally the biggest middleweight of all time, where people couldn't comprehend how he was able to make the weight class. And even though since he's moved up to light heavyweight, he's been consistently the biggest guy in every single one of his fucking fights, right? There's literally not a single light heavyweight on the roster that's fought him that's been bigger than him. He's just a small fry. What a stupid question from the media. What a stupid question. And Dana White knows it's dumb.
He's going to jump up 2 weight classes in the UFC.
Come on, man. The UFC is the big time. You don't just jump up 2 weight classes in the UFC. It's the big time.
It's not like jumping up 2 weight classes in boxing. It's a big jump.
And as far as Yuri's performance...
And it's not that...
Pereira literally is like 245 in the offseason. Pereira is 6'4", close to 6'5". He's taken photos with Tyson Fury in which they look damn near the same height. He is constantly talked about as being like this giant. What are we talking about?
I don't have any reservations about it. I mean, the guy is, he's in a division that there's still some interesting fights. I don't know. It's just, I like the guy so much. We'll see. We'll have to talk about it. I just don't see why, unless he wants to retire, why throwing him in at heavyweight makes any sense, other than I just end up saying he wants to do it so bad. I'll just say yes. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what it is. Pereira, he just wants to do it so bad, and we love the guy. We're just going to give him what he wants. We're going to say yes. We're just going to give in. He's our friend. Like, no, that's not why. It's because he's been a dominant force at light heavyweight. Pereira's the only guy that actually has an argument to now move up yet again based on merit, based on what he's been able to achieve. So let's just get into this. Let's destroy this idea that it's some kind of a joke for him to move up. And I'm also going to tackle this idea that Pereira and Aspinall is not competitive as well. Okay, first things first. What have MMA fans been saying about heavyweight for the past year, especially since Jon Jones has retired? They've been saying that heavyweight just is not interesting because of how dominant Tom Aspinall has been and because he's already taken out the majority of contenders in the top 10. So right off the bat, what is the alternative at heavyweight after the surreal Gane fight, in which Aspinall should probably win? And if he loses, that throws a wrench into all of this, and then that changes everything, and maybe the Jones fight actually does make sense. But guys, if he wins against Gane, he would have taken out Pavlovich, Volkov, Gane. But do we really need to see a Jailton Almeida fight when we have an opportunity to see this? I don't think so. And similarly at light heavyweight, Alex Pereira has cleared out the majority of dangerous contenders in the top 10. Okay? The Olberg fight, it's just not as interesting. I'm not saying it's not interesting. It's not as interesting. And taking into account that Alex Pereira is 38, he's already accomplished a ton in the sport, is a top 10 fighter of all time. It's looking like he's not going to stick around for that much longer. It's just nowhere near as cool as seeing him have a chance to move up and become the only 3-weight world champion in UFC history. This is what I'm talking about. This is why it's important to make Pereira versus Aspinall, because that's the only fight in which Alex Pereira, who has now become a middleweight champ, a light heavyweight champ, and has defended his belt at light heavyweight, gotten the belt back at light heavyweight, taken out the majority of contenders, he has earned the right to move up again. Okay? And also, you don't waste this opportunity on Olberg. Alex Pereira just gained all of his aura back, all of his momentum back. We have a chance to have him move up a weight class, to make history, to do something that's never been done before. I don't think it's a good idea to take a risk of Olberg beating him. And I know some people are going to not understand that, and they're going to be commenting, whoa, so I guess you don't want Olberg to beat him, huh? That's the real reason. There's a chance, and it's not worth taking, because if Olberg beats him, now we do not have an opportunity to make one of the biggest, baddest fights in history. Yes, I, as an MMA fan, I love the next contender, but there's nothing more, you don't get to sit there and act like you're more of a hardcore fan because you want to see Olberg versus Pereira because they're in the same division, as opposed to Pereira fighting a guy that happens to be fighting in a different weight class. Okay? I'm not a casual because I want to see Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall. I'm not a casual because I want to see that fight. And no one's more hardcore because, I just want Olberg is dead. No. Okay? And also, you don't waste this opportunity on a light heavyweight title fight with Jones either. And especially not a non-heavyweight title fight with Jones. If he fights Jon Jones at light heavyweight, that's great. That's still a big fight, but you have an opportunity for Alex to become the first ever triple champ. If you have him fight Jones at heavyweight, you're missing the opportunity for him to become a triple champ. Jones doesn't have the belt anymore. It's basically an exhibition match. It just doesn't make sense. Tom Aspinall is in his prime. He's looking unstoppable. And he made the GOAT of the sport in the eyes of most people. That is Jon Jones. He made Jon Jones retire out of fear of losing to him, and he holds the undisputed title. He's, like Pereira, a scary KO artist. And like Jon Jones, has the threat of the takedown, has the ability to grapple, where it's not just Pereira fighting a pure striker. And it's also not just Pereira fighting a pure grappler. Not that Jones is a pure grappler, but we all know that Jones doesn't have a KO threat against Alex Pereira. It's more interesting for Pereira to go in there against a guy with a grappling threat and a threat of putting his lights out, just like he has the threat of putting his opponent's lights out. Okay, this is the fight to make. And also, let's just tackle this idea of Pereira being a former middleweight. It just doesn't make sense. He was a small fry back in the day. Okay, what about now? What about this past weekend, when Pereira quite literally looked to be twice the size of Magomed Ankalaev in the octagon? And what about the fact that Alex Pereira at light heavyweight is constantly the bigger man in his fights? If Daniel Cormier is able to move up a weight class and take out Stipe Miocic, who was a half a foot taller than him, if DC, the 5'10 former light heavyweight that legitimately could have made welterweight if he really tried back in the day, if this guy was able to win the heavyweight title, all right, and he's unlike Pereira, he wasn't actually that big of a person at 205. DC was always smaller than his opponents at 205 as well. He looked like he was half the size of Jon Jones. He looked like he was half the size of Alexander Gustafsson when he was the light heavyweight champ. Pereira, on the other hand, is bigger than the modern light heavyweights, who are bigger than the light heavyweights in the past. Let's talk about this. Alex Pereira, every time you see him next to one of these other 205ers, he has a bigger frame. He's taller than them as well. You see him facing off with Cyril Gane, and this was, mind you, taken a couple of years ago before Pereira really filled out his frame at 205 pounds. Sure, he looks a little bit lighter than Cyril Gane, but let's not act like this is just this is crazy. This guy is moving up 50 weight classes. It just doesn't make sense. Pereira's just a pipsqueak compared to these guys. Okay? No, not at all. Here he is with Jon Jones about a year and a half ago when Jones was the heavyweight champion. Pereira does not look like a small fry. This does not look like a middleweight standing next to a heavyweight. This looks like two heavyweights. So this idea, again, that Pereira is just this former middleweight, I don't give a fuck what weight class this guy used to fight in, dude. Rumble Johnson used to make 170 pounds. When he was fighting at 205, no one was saying, oh, this guy's a former welterweight. I mean, people were saying that because they were shocked that he was a former welterweight, but they weren't saying that to imply that he's a small fighter at 205 pounds. It doesn't matter if Alex Pereira weighed 100 pounds back in the day. He is 240 plus pounds in the offseason today. He was bigger than Magomed Ankalaev in the cage this weekend. So what on earth are we talking about? You could just say that about everyone. Oh, this guy used to weigh 40 pounds when he was fucking 3 years old. So what? Pereira is a heavyweight-sized human being, and if you just give him a 4 or 5 month period to bulk up, he will be as big as someone like Cyril Gane. He will. And before I talk about the promo that they're doing for Tom Aspinall, because that's going to tie into the argument that I'm going to make for why it makes more sense to do the Pereira and Aspinall fight over the Jon Jones-Pereira fight, I just want to talk about this idea that Alex Pereira would not be competitive with Tom Aspinall. I still see a lot of MMA fans saying things along the lines of, are you out of your mind? Pereira would get folded up and he would get 8 at heavyweight. They would hit him there. Dude, what are you saying? There are guys like Bam Bam Tuivasa who are flooding the earth and the earth cracks when he's walking around. You have legitimate dinosaurs in that weight class. Volkov is just, no. I understand you think that Alex Pereira, because he's able to knock out some of these small guys at 205, he's a former middleweight. At one time, he weighed 12 pounds when he was born. Therefore, he couldn't be competitive with Volkov or with Pavlovich or Almeida or Gane. Okay, dude, speaking of this, Jelton Almeida, no one talks about him being a former fucking welterweight, even though he started his career as a welterweight. All right, the point that I'm making is you got to get out of this idea that the heavyweights are too big for them, because I keep hearing people say stuff like that. I keep hearing like UFC analysts. I don't remember exactly who it is, but it's like either DC or it's Dan Hardy, or I don't remember who it was. But there's a few UFC former fighters that still say things like heavyweight's just a different thing. It's just a different thing. Yeah, when it comes to skill, they are way, way less skilled. And since we already tackled this idea of Pereira being a small fry, he's clearly not. He is quite literally the biggest light heavyweight on the roster. So you don't even get to say stuff like that. Let's talk about the fact that the heavyweight division, it's a shit division in regards to skill. It just is. These guys are nowhere near the level of skill of Magomed Ankalaev. They're nowhere near the level of skill of someone like Adesanya on the feet. And so, yeah, you see Cyril Gane able to have a masterclass performance against Tai Tuivasa, who was literally just a big blob of fat. Okay, you have Shamil Gaziev in the top 10. And I love Shamil. Shamil Gaziev is quite literally one of the GOATs. But, like, come on. Okay? We all are aware of lighter man's skill. We're all aware of that. So we already acknowledge that Alex Pereira is the biggest light heavyweight on the roster, and clearly if he moves up a weight class, that's not a middleweight moving up, that is a light heavyweight moving up one weight class. You look at that the same way you would look at Ilia Topuria going from 145 to 155. Okay, you don't look at it as Pereira moving up from 185 like he's some regular 185 guy like Robert Whittaker moving up to heavyweight. You do not do that. You would look at it like it's Volk moving up to 155. You look at it like it's Jones moving up to heavyweight. You look at it like anyone else moving up one weight class. And we know when people move up one weight class, they have a tremendous skill advantage over the majority of people in that weight class. That's why more often than not, if you predict fights simply based on lighter man skill when it comes to these fighters moving up, you will be right 90% of the time. Remember when people were saying Oliveira is just going to be too big for Ilia Topuria? Granted, most people picked Ilia Topuria, but there was a decent amount of people saying that Charles is just going to be too big for him and Topuria's power is just not going to be the same. What happens? The skill, the speed, the technique, it's simply too much. And he gets a result that is tremendously more impressive than other lightweights that have been able to beat Charles Oliveira. And so I don't understand this idea of, oh, well, Aspinall, it's just ridiculous for him to even be mentioned in the same idea as Alex Pereira. Why? Because it's a foregone conclusion that he would take Alex Pereira down? I think it's definitely possible. That's why the fight is really exciting. I have said many times that Tom Aspinall is probably the most dangerous human being in history when it comes to mano-a-mano combat, hand-to-hand combat. I think I would favor Tom Aspinall to beat Alex Pereira. But weren't we just saying earlier this year that Magomed Ankalaev, even before he won the first fight against Pereira, was going to be able to take him down and out-grapple him? Dagestani, obviously majority striker, but he has the ability to wrestle. We've seen him 10-8 people on the ground like Jan Blachowicz, who have been training in MMA for much longer. So why is it a foregone conclusion that just because Tom Aspinall is able to take down Volkov, a heavyweight skilled striker, or Andrei Arlovsky, okay, why is it a foregone conclusion that he's just going to twist Alex Pereira up into a pretzel? Hey, Pereira stuffed 10 takedowns against Magomed Ankalaev, a modern era light heavyweight who's extremely skilled and has only lost in his prime to one person, and that's Alex Pereira, who has had success on the ground in his career before. I'm tired of hearing this, oh, well, Pereira just gets submitted and won. It's possible. Tom Aspinall could definitely do it, but you're basing it off of one performance against Volkov, who is a striker with heavyweight skill. All right. And also, I think that a lot of these guys that are saying, well, it's easily Tom Aspinall and it's a joke to even bring up this fight. Why? Pereira was able to take out Magomed Ankalaev, who's like the most difficult fighter at light heavyweight to actually hit clean. He just knocked him out in a minute. We've seen him outstrike Adesanya and knock Adesanya out. We've seen him knock out the most defensively sound striker in the upper weight classes in Sean Strickland in a matter of minutes. We've seen him make a Yuri Prohaska fight look clean and look easy and have his way with Yuri, in which he hardly got touched, hardly got clipped in that rematch, and just styled on him. And that's the guy that is the best fighter in the world at dragging you into chaos. So for people to sit there and act like Alex Pereira would just simply get folded up into a lawn chair just because Tom Aspinall has knocked out Curtis Blades, or just because he's been able to KO other plotty heavyweights like Sergey Pavlovich, when you have Alex Pereira knocking out in Tom Aspinall fashion, who just had a Tom Aspinall-esque performance against a fighter that is levels above anyone that Tom Aspinall has taken out. We're really going to sit there and act like Alex Pereira just couldn't also KO Tom Aspinall, who we all have to admit has his chin up in the air quite a bit in his fights. He runs forward with his classic Big Shelly. Big Shelly! Right, clobbering right hand. Typically, he'll have his chin in the air. Yeah, that shit 100% will work against Curtis Blades. And I think it could work against Pereira. Aspinall's very fast. But we cannot sit here and act like a striker of the caliber of Alex Pereira, who also has one-punch knockout power, could not just slump Aspinall out in a couple of minutes as well. This is a much more competitive fight than Ciryl Gane, because Alex Pereira, former middleweight skill, former lighter man skill, moving up, Glory Kickboxing 6-time world champion, 2-weight world champion in the UFC, has won countless striking battles against high-level strikers. Ciryl Gane is not a better striker than Alex Pereira, and the other major difference is Ciryl Gane doesn't have the ability to put you out with one punch. So, What is the intrigue in the Gane fight for Aspinall, by the way? What if he can't finish him early? Gane's going to be slick. He's going to have the volume. Dude, Pereira is the slick guy with the volume that can also knock you out. So this idea that, again, Aspinall and Pereira is some kind of a joke, like, people need to take into account just how competitive and badass this fight is. And it sounds as if I'm diminishing Aspinall's chances. I'm not. I'm just making the case that Pereira is a scary matchup for the guy. Way tougher of a matchup than any heavyweight. Way tougher. And your argument against that is going to be, no, because Gane is bigger than Alex Pereira, and he won't just get, tossed to the ground easily, even though Gane got tossed to the ground easily against a fucking light heavyweight in Jon Jones and submitted in 2 minutes. No, because Gane's just bigger than him and has more power because he's a heavyweight. Yeah, I mean, Gane doesn't knock anyone out, but, he's a heavyweight. Of course he's more powerful than Alex Pereira. Like, these are the arguments that I could imagine. It just wouldn't make any sense. This is the fight. This is it. It's competitive. Tom Aspinall, the way that he's looked at heavyweight, I've said many times, this is the most dangerous human being to ever walk the earth. I want to see it proven, and you need to prove it against a light heavyweight skill fighter who is a top 10 fighter of all time. And he's going to have a skill advantage over all of these heavyweights, except for maybe Tom. That's why it's interesting. The baddest heavyweight we've ever seen in Tom Aspinall. Maybe not resume-wise the greatest, but probably the best heavyweight ever. I want to see him fight the most dangerous light heavyweight ever. Again, I'm not saying Pereira is the greatest light heavyweight ever. A lot of his accomplishments are also at middleweight, which is why he's top 10 on the GOAT list as well. But you get what I'm saying. And also, let me just make this argument as well, because the last argument to be made for why this makes more sense is because it's Jon Jones. He's a bigger name, and it simply would just be a bigger fight, and the UFC needs to prioritize whatever is going to sell more pay-per-views. If they want to do this big card at the White House, Aspinall is not a household name like Jon Jones is, and therefore it makes a lot more sense to do the Jon Jones fight. Once again, there is something to be said about the fact that the Aspinall fight is the one in which Pereira has a chance to become the only triple champ, 3-weight world champion in UFC history. That is the definition of marketable. He has the ability to be the only fighter ever to do something. Remember how sick it was when McGregor won his second belt and was the only guy to do that? I know Pereira wouldn't hold all 3 of these belts consecutively, but he'd be the only person to ever do it. That's something that you can market. And also, why on earth would we prioritize a fighter who is only going to fight once more? And if it's at heavyweight, it's going to be an exhibition match over the guy who made him retire and will continue to fight for many years to come. It just doesn't make sense. Aspinall will be an even bigger name after he beats Gane. He'll be more relevant when he gets a win recently. And when I say recently, it'll be after the Gane fight. If he beats him, not 100% chance, but if he beats him, that will make him more relevant. Aspinall's going to stick around. He's young. He's in his prime. Jon Jones, if he comes back, it's a one and done type of fight, and that's it. Why would you want to do that when, for example, if Jones wins, he's going to ride off into the sunset, right? If Aspinall wins, Aspinall takes a good chunk of Pereira's hype for beating one of the UFC icons, one of the UFC legends. And then the heavyweight champ that has not gotten a lot of help with the way that the UFC's been promoting him will actually have that big win on his resume that takes him to the next level. And because he'll stick around for many years to come, that will be good for the UFC, for Tom Aspinall, when it comes to bringing in a lot of viewers to watch Tom Aspinall fight. If Jones wins, he gets a lot of that hype, but he's gone. You don't get to promote him anymore. And Aspinall, who's going to be left, waiting in the dust, fighting these fucking heavyweight contenders that no one cares about, which those fights matter. They should happen, but they shouldn't take priority over a legendary fight. Tom Aspinall will just be the heavyweight champ that, again, the UFC is going to, treat him like he doesn't really matter, or he's not a big draw. He's not a big draw because you're not giving him the opportunity to actually fight someone like Alex Pereira or Jon Jones. It doesn't make sense. If Pereira beats Tom Aspinall, Pereira's the biggest star in the sport. Okay? If Pereira beats Jon Jones, it's like, that's great. He doesn't have the third belt. And if Tom Aspinall beats Alex Pereira, you have this guy in the sport for many years to come. He's going to be a much bigger name. So it just doesn't make sense. And it's also going to tie into this. one of the reasons why the UFC gets to say shit like Tom Aspinall, well, I mean, obviously he wasn't the bigger name. He wanted to do the biggest, baddest fight between the two biggest names in the upper weight class as an Aspinall. He's not in that top two. I'm not saying if they promoted Tom more, he'd be a bigger household name than Jones. But what I am saying is it doesn't help that they're just ignoring the fact that Jones ducked Tom Aspinall in the promo for Tom Aspinall's next fight. I know you guys were watching this pay-per-view this past weekend when they rolled out the promo for UFC 321, Aspinall versus Gane. And I thought it was disgraceful. I thought it was pathetic. Because here you have a guy that should be hyped up for being this badass that even the GOAT of the sport, looked at by the casuals, by the masses, the people that only tune into 1 or 2 UFC cards every couple of years, they look at Jon Jones as that guy, the scariest fighter ever. He's the baddest fighter ever, right? The household name. The fact that they're not even using the fact that that guy ducked this fighter right here in Tom Aspinall, that Tom Aspinall, he's so scary. Even the GOAT of the sport retired because he didn't want to fight him. Like, that is something that should be being used to promote this guy. That's not saying they have to shit all over Jon Jones necessarily, but it's like, hey, Jones isn't fighting for you anymore. Jones is not fighting for you anymore. This guy is. He will be around for many years to come. Why are we not mentioning the fact that he's so terrifying that the GOAT of the sport did not want to fight him? They're doing a Tom Aspinall promo like it's a fight night main event for the Apex. It's no different. No wonder this guy isn't going to be that big of a star, because they're fucking him over to prioritize some guy that just left the sport, is retired. It just doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, you know what? You know what's more promotable than this? Alex Pereira versus the guy that made Jon Jones retire. I want to see Alex Pereira fight Tom Aspinall, both guys being in their prime. I don't think that Jon Jones, who's retired and old, is more exciting of a fight than the guy that made him leave the sport because of how terrifying he was. And when it comes to a Pereira fight, the reason why Pereira fights are so exciting is because he himself is terrifying. Because he's looked at as the boogeyman that, you know, no matter how much of a badass you are, no matter how tough you are, he has the death touch. I want to see him fight another guy with the death touch. Him versus Jon Jones, that's him versus an older, cobbly Jones who has to shoot takedowns in order to win. Him versus Aspinall, that's two guys with insane knockout power. And Tom Aspinall has the chance to take him down as well. That's exciting. And it is competitive. So Dana White, you need to stop living under a rock. He's a light heavyweight. He's the biggest light heavyweight on the roster. What is this bullshit about him being 185 pounds? He ain't 185. You don't get to talk about him like he's just some random middleweight. And again, Pereira having a chance to get a third belt, that's something you can't pass up on. And also, his opponent should be someone that if he wins, it actually matters that he takes a lot of that hype from Pereira or becomes more popular after beating Pereira because he sticks around. If Jones wins, he's done forever. You know, what is this? Is this the Jon Jones Fighting Championship? No. Okay? What is best for the sport? What's best for the future of the promotion? It's Aspinall versus Pereira. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And lastly, if you enjoy my content, but you're also passionate about fitness and health, I am posting vlogs, tier lists, reaction videos, and fitness advice videos on Patreon. So if you want to join, the link is in the description.